happy to meet you on this occasion and get a chance to come back to Harpers Ferry, which I called Harpers Ferry, Virginia. It was Western Virginia, well, we referred to Western Virginia when I first came through here in 1847. You see, I was from Illinois. I was elected as a Whig, the party of Webster and Clay, to come to Washington City and be in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so my train pulled in with Mrs. Lincoln and 3 of our children. It came here on December the 1st, 1847. That was the beginning of the 30th Congress. The next day I would have to be in Washington City. So I came here in 1847, which was exactly 100 years after Mr. Harper came here and developed the ferry service across the Susquehanna and the Potomac. So I was here on the 100th anniversary. Now later I would find out that Harpers Ferry would have a great interest for our country and future visits for me. But I wanted to say that I'm happy to be back where I first came in 1847 on a winter night, December the 1st. We pulled in here, well, it was after dark, late afternoon, on my way to Washington. But I was happy to think that I was in the area where my father had been born. You see, my father, Tom Lincoln, was born just a little bit northwest of Harrisonburg, Virginia, down in the valley. The year was 1778, just about the time that our Articles of Confederation appeared to give us a federal government. But there was another Tom, Tom Jefferson, who 2 years before my father had been born, gave us the draft of our Declaration of Independence, and that was in 1776. Both Jefferson and myself would be involved with education. Presidents, I guess, generally are proclaiming the value of education for a free society. If a free society is going to exist, its citizens must be educated. And so Jefferson would start a wonderful university in his home of Charlottesville. Now, he would be on the site to help establish it during its early construction. He would be there to choose faculty and to be involved with curriculum choices. So everybody would honor that. I compared my education with Tom Jefferson as very minimal. I was in my formative years out in Indiana when I got to go to a log cabin school that maybe had 7 or 8 students in it. And if you totaled up all the days I had been in that school by the time I was 18 years of age, those days would not have accumulated to much more than a year. So when we talk about education, mine pales in comparison with this graduate of William and Mary and all of the things that he did as a lawyer. I was a lawyer, but I never went to law school. I grew up training myself in an office out in Springfield, Illinois, and was eventually held on retainer by the Illinois Central Railroad. So both of us had an interest in law, had an interest in education, and had an interest in this issue that might divide this country called slavery. So let me tell you a little bit about my attitude on that. 6 years before I was born, 1809, Tom Jefferson, a man I've never met, but I could certainly read about him, and I certainly did. And in 1803, 6 years before I was born, Tom Jefferson doubled the acreage of our country as president, 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. But all those acres he purchased from France were west of the Mississippi River. They started to carve territories out of that purchase, and in 1820 a territory called Missouri applied for statehood. But they wanted to come into our union with slaves. And the Congress said, well, we want to accommodate you, but you know, Missouri, we've been very careful over this slavery issue to keep our Senate in balance. 2 senators from a slave state must be balanced by 2 senators from a free state. That issue was so hot and burning in us. It had been there when Washington was there. It had been there at the time of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And it wasn't going to go away. It was still there in 1820, 6 years before Jefferson died. And in 1820, Missouri was told, well, it's going to take a little patience to get you enslaved, we're going to have to cut away that northeast corner of Massachusetts and start calling it Maine. So that's how that happened. So now the Congress went a step further. The Congress said we're going to draw a line 36 degrees and 30 minutes north latitude. It's going to go from the west bank of the Mississippi out through the territory Mr. Jefferson purchased from France. I guess you today would say, why, I reckon that's about halfway through what we call Colorado. It was called the Missouri Compromise Line, and if you lived south of that line, you could own slaves, and if you lived north of it, you could not. Now, I reckon we had 26 million people in the country, and the proportion of those who lived back in the Northeast hated that, but they understood one thing: it had become the law. Here came the problem, 1854, and it came from my state. We had an ambitious Democratic senator from Illinois. His name was Stephen A. Douglas. And in 1854, he thought he could get to the White House 2 years later, but he realized then he couldn't get there without Southern votes. So in 1854, he put forth a bill that would do away with the Missouri Compromise Line. It would let Southern planters take their slaves all the way up to the Canadian border in those territories that we said were west of Minnesota and Iowa. Now, slavery was never to go there. Douglas knew that. He went all around Illinois telling people, we just can't stand in the way of these Southern men taking their slave labor into the Northwest. We need to change that law.